So this is an official guidance memo from the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Career Tech and Adult Ed, so OCTAE. It's a communication between the feds and the state offices of adult ed. So you can see it's written to the state directors. So the state's offices in each of your states are going to make decisions based on the information in here, right? There are things that states can do, choices states can make based on this guidance. So if you're not in a state office, I always recommend reading these because it's just really interesting to sort of know the universe of the possible so that you can advocate for what is possible. And in this particular memo, the feds are seeking to clarify and provide some flexibility and some support to the state offices for the continuity of operations, right? So there are 9 questions. This thing is organized as an FAQ. I believe that it is an output of a conversation that OCTAE had with the state directors, actually a phone call, where some of these questions were posed. And you can see that the bulk of them, as we get to the end, are about distance learning. But it's worth just glancing through the first ones so you can sort of get a feel for it. The first question is really about performance and whether or not, if states are serving fewer participants, as we imagine will happen, whether they'll be penalized. And the short answer for that is no, states will not be sanctioned. The penalty from the state offices to the feds is a sanctioning process for WIOA, and it's all the WIOA partners together. And it goes on to explain that OCTAE doesn't have the information it needs to be able to sanction based on how WIOA does that. And then it references another program memo. So this program memo is 20-3, which means it's the third one in the year 2020. And it references 20-2, which is also a fascinating program memo all about performance and how negotiated performance will happen for all the WIOA partners, including adult ed. So these things are always sort of layers. They all point to other things, and you might want to go through and read that. But essentially, it's just asking people to be able to monitor and share what happens during this COVID response and write that in the narrative report, which goes to the feds in 2020. So it's really important that state offices are giving local providers guidance on how we should be collecting the information about what we're trying to do, what the results of that are, right? Because that's the kind of thing that OCTAE is going to be looking for in lieu of, well, in addition to numbers. The second one is about a question about performance negotiations. So there's always a conversation that happens between your state adult ed office and the feds about those targeted numbers you're supposed to hit in each education function level. And your states just recently turned in their WIOA combined or unified plan to the federal agencies. In that plan, people put expected levels of performance, what they thought they were going to, the targets should be. Once in the process of approving those plans, in the conversation that happens between the states and the feds, then those expected levels of performance turn into approved negotiated levels, which makes me think, and I know there are some state office folks on the phone, so it would be really interesting to hear from you. It makes me think that in that process, in that conversation that's about to happen between the state offices and the feds, there might be a chance even there to be adjusting those negotiated levels based on our current situation. Questions 3 and 4 are really about the grant competition. Some states have their competition for the WIOA Title II funding happening, and this is basically saying you can have a year extension in your grant making process, states, out to your locals. And question 4 says, do I have to tell you if I'm going to do that? And they say no. So you have the ability to do that as a state office if you need to modify your grant competition. or the length of your contracts. Okay, then we get into the distance learning questions. So the first question is about flexibility, about reporting the hours for distance learning. And here again is another one of those layers. The document points to the NRS, but I think the really important line here is that states may but are not required to report hours in the NRS for distance learning. I know people who are joining this call are probably already doing robust distance learning, have distance learning policies, have already put this kind of hour collection into their policies, but that is all a may. It's not a requirement. If you do wish to record proxy contact hours, this is the guidance that's in the NRS Technical Assistance Guide that talks about, you can do that based on actual elapsed time, clock time. You can do it by teacher verification, where you have a number of hours for each thing, or you can do it in this more competency-based learner mastery model, and that you would be picking that proxy contact hour model based on what's most appropriate for that curriculum you're using. Question 6 is about the actual contact. This is about those 12 hours, hitting that magic threshold of 12 hours that turn an enrollee into a participant for federal reporting. And it talks about you need to have 12 contact hours. And really what the gist of this is that contact hours can be through telephone, they can be through video, they can be through online communication, as long as the participant and the program staff are interacting, and you can identify the participant's identity is verifiable in some way. So that is not a change. That is simply pointing to the fact that contact hours do not have to be face-to-face. And then it goes on to talk about, you may have some people who are, you've been serving already, and they're less than 12 hours, so you can use this method to get them to 12 hours. You may have people who newly enroll in your programs while you're in the distance learning mode. They also can become a participant through accruing these contact hours. So that's not a new thing, that's just again, clarification. Flexibility, question 7 is about assessment and flexibilities in assessment. One of I think the interesting things they talk about here is that, we use assessment in adult ed for pre-test, post-test measurable skill gain. There are other measurable skill gains, so they point to that this is an opportunity to perhaps use other measurable skill gains. And then they also talk about you could do online testing, right? Virtual test proctoring. And again, if you do that, there are some things that you have to pay attention to, that you can verify the student, that the test, the NRS approved test, is secure, and that the virtual proctor can properly administer the test. So again, not new permissions, but just clarification. Question 8 is about flexibilities in your distance learning policy. And they give permission here that a state can allow any AFLA grantee to administer a distance learning program, even if you don't have a distance learning policy in place. They do encourage states to, do that as soon as it's feasible. And that, remember, when you create such a plan, you have to pay attention to certain things like how you're going to collect hours if you choose to do so, how you're going to do student assessment, and what sort of guidance on the curriculum that you would encourage local programs to use. And then finally, question 9, which is sort of shocking to see, but somebody must have asked, can you actually pay teachers to do this kind of online instruction? And the answer is yes, of course, you can pay teachers to do this kind of online instruction. Okay, so the things I want to just emphasize again for this context, for this conversation, are around those questions 6, 7, and 8, the actual contact, and it can be through not face-to-face means, right? And that is perfectly acceptable. Question 7, if you can't do in-person testing, you can use other measurable skill gains, or you can set up some sort of virtual pre-test, post-test. As long as you can identify the student, you can secure the NRS approved test, and the proctor can properly administer the test. And question 8, you don't have a plan, that's fine. Make one, modify one. If you do, then you need to include if and how you're going to collect those instructional hours, what's your assessment policy, and info on the curriculum. And then question 9, when it says, can you pay teachers to deliver distance learning? And it says, yes, of course, as long as they're doing allowable AFLA activities. This is the definition of allowable AFLA activities. It is the comprehensive definition of what adult ed is. So it's, it does include family literacy activities. You'd think that could be a very interesting thing with all the schools trying to do curriculum with the children. Perhaps there's an opportunity to partner there. You can do IT, you can do workforce prep. Any allowable activity under AFLA is allowable under distance ed. And then finally, distance education itself is a definition that we have through the NRS Technical Assistance Guide. So I wanted to put this up here. This is, again, nothing new, but sometimes it helps to have the actual definition in case someone is trying to tell you otherwise. But, it can be audio recordings, it can be videotape, it can be broadcasts, as well as web-based and online technology, and even by mail. And finally, the last thing I'll point out is that when you're doing your federal reporting through the National Reporting System, each participant only gets counted once as one kind of participant, either as a distance ed participant or a traditional classroom participant. And so I think that's going to be an interesting conversation too, right? Most people put that in their policy. What kind of, at what hour threshold does somebody become a distance ed person instead of a traditional classroom person? And so that may be again, collecting information and making decisions as we're in this new world.